So easy, Don. Just magical. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Lou Weir, who's our guest speaker this morning. Lou has been studying, is it the Diamond Way or Diamond Approach? I've heard both. The Diamond Approach for many, many years, and we've crossed paths along the way in quite a few different settings. And also you're involved with the Insight Meditation Group, which meets on Newport Road and is probably meeting right now. Yes. So thank you for coming. And Lou is going to share some information and experience with the Diamond Approach. And also, maybe you'll tell us a little bit about the retreat that's coming up that you're leading. Oh, all right. And I know there are flyers and some things out on the table. So come on up, Lou. Looking forward.
Thank you, Dallas. I'm always impressed with what a warm and friendly place you have here. It's really a lovely space, and I always enjoy coming here, and you have every right to be proud of what you've created here. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I have the pleasure of talking to you a little bit about a practice that I've done for about 25 years called the Diamond Approach. But I also hope that in my talk that I'll also be able to share something that will help you on your journey, whatever your journey is. I always find that looking at things from a little different point of view can also inform your own journey, even if it's different than what's being described. So I hope you'll find something in my talk for you as well. The spiritual path can be described many different ways. Oh, I also have to say to you, I feel a little humbled by the message that was just read from Trungpa Rinpoche, who said that I'm not an expert on this practice. I just want to say, if Trungpa Rinpoche is not an expert on his practice, I'm not an expert on my practice either. I want to claim that space as well. That was actually a very lovely message, and it actually dovetails a lot. If I knew it was going to be read, I probably could have worked with that a little bit more, but it was a lovely message. But I'm no expert either. So, but the spiritual path can be described many different ways. Finding your way home, union with the beloved, union with everything, an expression of true nature, an expression of God's will. You know, there's many different ways of looking at it. What has informed me for many years is finding the traces and finding the place of my authentic self. And this place has a feeling of being home. It has a feeling of being self-supporting, centered, and it's associated with a deep kind of contentment and a vulnerability that is so radical that nothing sticks to it. Nothing is pushed away, no place to go, nothing to do. That's the feeling that I have that orients me towards my spiritual path. And when we come to a spiritual practice, usually we see that there's something a little bit off, that we wonder, how is it that we became disconnected from where we really reside? And in the Diamond Approach, we see in part that's because of how we grew up. To just refer back to Trungpa Rinpoche, he said in his message, the things that were taught, he said in school, and I think it's school, parenting, and all those sorts of things. We start in a beautiful place of openness and spontaneity, and you can see that in babies. But as we grow, we're gradually taught that we need to be a certain way to be able to be responded to by the world around us. We might have a place in us that's big and bold, and we're a little kid, and we're in the shopping cart, and we grab something on the shelf, and we see it, and we grab it, and our mother gives us a look, and we don't take that in as, oh, maybe I shouldn't be grabbing things in stores. We take it in as, oh, there's something wrong with me wanting something. So, and that's in the best of circumstances. That's in many ways, our parents don't see our authentic, true nature, and in some cases are actually upset by it. Like a father might see unabandoned joy expressed by a son or a daughter, and it might upset the parent. And because of our love for our parents, we tend to give up those places that cause friction. And some of those things that we give up are part of who we are. Maybe a small boy has an artistic temperament, but incarnated in a family that's gregarious and athletic. And so he might tend to, again, out of love for his parents, suppress those areas of his nature that are sensitive. So there can be a gap between our expressed identity and who we really are. And what's more, we start to cut off our awareness of that. It becomes so, this identity that's presented becomes so much of what is expressed that we totally forget that these other impulses are there. So we become so well molded, we kind of forget about this process. But I think this, for me, the spiritual practice is starting to lift the cover on that and see, yeah, there's something more here. There's something that's a little bit off in the way that this self-identity presents itself. So it's interesting to me that the transcendent religions, Sufism, Buddhism, and Vedanta, all agree with psychology and the Diamond Approach that we're not born with a self, at least not a historical self that we normally think of. So psychology would consider the healthy ego the final stage, but spiritual practice would look upon it as an intermediate stage. There's nothing wrong with developing that self that can negotiate the world, but it's not the final stopping point. So one of the purposes of any path is to learn about this false identity and to start to take it apart and see what it really is. And the process of doing that is what the spiritual path is for. That's what I have found when I've been working with the Diamond Approach. We see how we lost ourselves, which allows us to see how to find our way back. So the path itself has sort of an environment and a process which allows us to begin to engage in an individual search. And we start to develop a taste for what's true. Now, many mystical paths hold the knowledge of this journey from the ego identity to the essential nature. But what differentiates the Diamond Approach is that we borrow a lot from the psychological knowledge that's accumulated in the 20th and 21st century to assist in dissolving the barriers. And it creates a systematic way for looking at this false identity. Instead of saying, as I have heard at times, this false identity is true, just don't believe in it. If that could work, we wouldn't have to have much practice. So if we could just hear that and it would happen, it would be fine. So we try to understand it, and we understand it in pieces. We look at little pieces, little segments. Typically, we'd meet in a group and there'd be a teaching on a particular aspect of practice, break up in groups of 2 and 3, and explore the topic for yourself. What does this mean? That's the inquiry that has been developed in the Diamond approach practice. So it's a dialectic or trialectic inquiry usually that brings the teaching home in a personal way. What does that mean for you? And in that way, the knowledge becomes useful and it becomes embodied, because just hearing the truth or hearing a particular piece of knowledge doesn't really do anybody much good until it somehow integrates with what's happening with you, both emotionally, physically, and mentally, all those things. So often our inquiry begins just where you are, beginning with a situation in your life, beginning with a feeling, with an emotion, and by looking at the present moment, it starts to open up as to what's underneath, what's supporting that place, and by understanding, these habit tendencies start to loosen a little bit, and you start to see more, start to see deeper. And it's not haphazard. There's the particular sectors of the personality are related to particular barriers to understanding. So as the journey progresses and the spiritual work deepens, it's possible to be guided more by the expansion into this more true part of ourselves that's expansive and is in touch with wisdom. And our practice encourages us to live this in a daily way in our life, in a real way. So our inquiry can include those deep spaces of mystery and also the content of our daily life, including images, mental thoughts, emotions, bodily feelings. Everything is included. So here's one example. You might start to work with something about a project at work that you have some concerns with, and you investigate it and you understand, you start to feel a fluttery feeling in your belly. Your legs maybe feel a little bit weak, and you just let that feeling be there. And the feeling itself starts to inform further inquiry, and you start to feel into it, and maybe something comes to mind. Gosh, I feel like I'm about 10 years old. And then you keep letting it develop, letting it be, without trying to push it one way or another, and then something else comes to mind. Oh, this is how I felt when I brought my report card to my father when I was 10 years old. And so you bring your awareness, your compassion, and your holding for that child that was in that situation, and it can open up further to the point where you say, I'm not 10 years old anymore. And when that penetrates, then that feeling can open up. That fluttery feeling might turn into a fiery volcano. It might turn into a place of deep will, your own true will. And that's one example. And I'm giving I've given this example a few times, and I always have to add a caveat. This is like the perfect inquiry, what I just described. What really happens is a bit more messy than that. And it takes longer, and things that are deep take many, many touches. You have to touch on it a lot. But eventually things start to be understood and start to loosen. So we start to become connected more with this place of expansion rather than this place, this small place of this 10-year-old, going in front of your boss, showing your report and feeling like you're 10 and you don't know what you're doing. So that's one example of the way that this could work. So we look at our lost connection to many things. We've lost connection to love. We lose the way that we lost our connection to compassion. We look at the ways that we lost our connection to peace, and all of those qualities. And each time we're looking at this sector, there's kind of a menu of common barriers and common snags in those particular areas. For example, the retreat that we're doing in April is on compassion. And I'll give you a little early what's it called? Not deal breaker, but when you give away the ending, what's that called? Spoiler. So a little spoiler. I'll give you a little spoiler on that. There's different barriers, but the primary barrier that we see to compassion is your inability to feel your own pain. And so because we close our heart to our own pain, we close our heart to being able to open to compassion. So that's just there's an interesting, and for many of these qualities, there are these sorts of things. There are other barriers too, but that's a primary barrier. And so one of the reasons it's called the diamond approach is because we pick different sectors, and it's kind of like looking at different facets of a jewel. You kind of look at it one way and look at it the other way. It's all truth, but you're looking at it from a particular viewpoint. And it's not for everybody. The work is done in group format, so it requires a certain kind of vulnerability and willingness to work in groups. And you need to be able to look at difficult things and hold them with curiosity and interest. But we are fortunate that there's a small group of people that are interested in doing this in Ann Arbor, and I've been leading retreats for about 2 years. And of course, anybody would be welcome to participate. I do the teaching with the assistance of outside teachers. We have a woman coming in from California to help teach this retreat in April. So if you're attracted to the work, there's information on a table out there, and I'm happy to stay after service for 15 minutes or so and talk with you further. And I hope, even if it's not of interest to you, that there's something in my talk that has helped illuminate something on your own path, some way that you can see a little deeper in your own path. And I wish you well on your journey, wherever that takes you. Thank you.